Councillor Andrew Zwick, distinguished award judges, President and members of the Lane Cove Historical Society, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honoured and grateful to accept this award. To be chosen as the recipient this year was a big surprise, and I'm humbled that our connections with Carisbrook has struck such a chord with the judges. Mum and I are both so very touched that our stories will be archived with the Lane Cove Historical Society for future generations to explore.
Can you hold it closer to your
Will
mouth?
do. Thank you to the esteemed judges for their recognition of our part in Carisbrook's history, and more importantly for acknowledging the contribution of the last private owners of Carisbrook, the McDougall twins and my great uncle Wes. My thanks must also go to the members of the Historical Society for their encouragement and interest in our story. It was back in June this year when my mum and I were invited by our neighbours to a Devonshire tea at Carisbrook. While we were there enjoying the excellent cake and coffee, word got out that my parents had celebrated their wedding breakfast at Carisbrook back in 1959. The Society's members showed great interest in Mum's stories and requested that I record the details for them in order to contribute more to what is already known about the McDougalls. The fact that there was a prize on offer provided me with the impetus to work to a deadline, even though my getting COVID got in the way there for a while, and Mum and I lost a few weeks of time together. Of course, the primary source could not have been possible without the memories of my darling mother, Mrs. Leah Benfield. My intention in putting together this primary source was to interview her and create a historical document of stories about the times she remembers at Carisbrook. I'm an only child and with no children of my own, so I'm what you call the end of the line. Mum and I do spend lots of time chatting, and like all people of her vintage, she loves to reminisce and trip down memory lane. I do my very best to remember all her stories, but now I'm also approaching a certain age and my memory just ain't what it used to be either. During our chats, the thought has often crossed my mind to record Mum's reminiscences for our extended family. I'm so pleased that Mum's treasured memories will now be made available to anyone interested in Carisbrook. My congratulations also go to the other entrants who no doubt spent considerable time researching and investigating an area of their own passion and personal interest. We'd all agree that the work of historians is noble, and in this fast-paced and rapidly changing world, there's definitely the need to learn from our past and ensure that memories are never lost. Nowadays, Carisbrook is presented in the style of the Brooks family in the 1880s, but from the late 1950s until early 60s, it was the home of my great-uncles, who brought their own style to the decor inside the house, while maintaining and upgrading the garden, building a garage and sandstone wall, restoring tiles and window shutters, and generally caring for a property which they treasured. A certain amount is already known about Jim McDougall and his twin brother Matthew, but it was my intention to shed a little light on Jim's life partner, my godfather and great uncle Wes. In those days, their partnership was barely spoken about, although it was completely accepted by their loving family and friends. My hope is to pay tribute to and acknowledge these marvellous men who led extraordinary lives and were beloved uncles and respected figureheads in our family. The interview that Mum and I recorded begins with a description of her wedding day and the meal that took place at Carisbrook on the 2nd of November 1959, and concludes with the sad and spookily identical passing of the identical twin McDougall brothers. I've prepared a few excerpts for you to listen to this evening, along with some of the precious few photos that we have. Once again, thank you so very much for this honour, and I hope you enjoy this short presentation.
My name is Ruth Benfield and I'm the great niece of Wesley Eaton. Wesley Eaton was the life partner of James McDougall, and the two of them, along with James McDougall's twin brother Matthew, were the last private owners of Carisbrook. I'm here today having a chat with my mum, Leah Benfield. Mum married my father, Alan Benfield, back in 1959, and they celebrated their wedding breakfast at Carisbrook. So, Mum, what do you remember about the 2nd of November 1959?
Well, on the day we were married at the Chatswood Registry Office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had a beautiful sit-down dinner.
Yeah.
It was the dining room, which is now the museum room.
So that's the room closest to the back near the kitchen.
That's correct,
Which,
yeah.
which they're currently renovating,
Yes,
aren't they?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And they had a big old fuel stove, which Jimmy and Matty cooked the meal for all of us. We had a wedding cake, which we had as dessert. It was just, Jimmy had made the cake. He was very clever, cooked anything, could do anything. Plain round white wedding cake with roses on the top.
So why was the decision made to have your reception at Carisbrook?
We didn't want a big wedding. We just needed the family there. My other sister had been married 2 weeks prior
Yeah.
to that, and we had another sister coming up to be married about a month after, so I elected just to have a very quiet family, which suited my husband and suited the family, and off we went and did it. I wore a bow made of raffia.
Yeah.
I wasn't dressed as a full bride, I had a short frock.
Yeah.
And he made me a beautiful raffia bow which went across my head and had a very short little dotty veil just across my eyes.
Yeah.
He made that for me.
And I think he made a few other hats and apparel and things for you over the years.
Yes, he did. He made the hat I wore for my daughter's christening. He also made my niece's Robin's wedding hat and her flower girl and bridesmaids. He did quite a bit. He made hats for his mother. And actually, Matty and Jimmy used to make their mother's dresses.
Really?
Yes.
So what, they had like a little sewing room or?
No, they did them in King Street in their salon.
Okay, so King Street was where their milliner's
The millinery business was there, yeah. And they made hats for all the wealthy ladies on the eastern suburbs, going to the races. They made hats for the Governor General's wife, Lady so-and-so, all well-known people. And everybody had their own personal block for their hat, for their head size.
So you'd go into the shop and you'd see all the different blocks.
See all the blocks all lined up.
I remember I went in there once when I was in my 20s and I was intending to go and say hello to Uncle Jim. And I'll never remember feeling so embarrassed when I was probably there for about 10-15 minutes and having a chat to him and suddenly realised it wasn't Uncle Jim, it was Uncle Matty. They were so alike, weren't
yes,
they?
very much alike.
Physically looking similar,
yes.
But you were telling me that personality-wise, not so similar.
2 different personalities. Matty was more reserved. Jimmy was a bit of a villain. Yes.
How so? What did he get up to?
He loved practical jokes. He loved to have his scotch and salute you with it. Slungivar, he used to say.
I do remember him turning up pretty much every Christmas morning into my 20s in the 1980s and so on to pick up his bottle of Johnny Walker.
Yes.
Yeah.
We always gave him a bottle of Johnny Walker on Christmas.
I know that Uncle Jim was mostly responsible for the decor and decorations in Carisbrook and also at Hunters Hill. Where did he get all the decor and bits and pieces that he used to make the place look fabulous?
A lot of the things came from an auctioneer's room in Neutral Bay. Thursday night used to be viewing. Uncle Wes and Jimmy would go out Thursday night. They'd get their number for the auction, which took place the next day around about 1 o'clock. Uncle Wes would leave the shop, take the truck out, the company truck, And a lot of the furniture was bought there, a lot of glassware.
And you still have some glassware that you've inherited from them?
I do, I have some of the glassware. I also have a pair of fighting cocks that they bought at auction.
So the brass fighting cocks that we still have?
We still have those, they were bought out at Neutral Bay auction. He used to always go out there and they used to collect glass grapes. And they bought all the glass grapes, they had a great big bowl full of them. So Matty and Jimmy decided they would make a display in a really heavy lead vase type thing, and they made a beautiful bowl of glass grapes made out of all the little bits of glass they could possibly find. And I have that as well. That used to be in Carisbrook and later on in Hunts Hill.
Where was it, in Carisbrook?
In Carisbrook it was in the lounge room.
Right, but on the dining table? Or?
No, it wasn't on the dining table, it was on a sideboard.
Yeah, it's beautiful and it's one of our most treasured possessions.
Absolutely, yes.
And then I've included in the report 2 photos, one of the macaroni tree as we call it, and the other one has to do with milk bottle tops, I believe. But could you describe the macaroni tree first of all, because you saw them making it?
Well, the macaroni tree, it's made out of glass beads, which is the top of the tree.
So they look like buttons.
Yes, they're not beads, they're glass beads and buttons.
Yeah.
Beads hold the buttons on.
So like little sugar beads, weren't
Yes,
they? Mm-hmm.
yes. And then it's got a plaster of Paris trunk.
So who designed that one?
Matty and Jimmy both did this.
Yeah.
And then sprinkled all over the bottom is macaroni.
And then the other piece of artwork that we had is the one that's made out of cream bottle tops.
Yes, it's a sheet of fabric put on a board, and they used to get cream, fresh cream in the little tiny squatty glass jars.
Yeah.
And Jimmy used to take all the tops off and make them into little flowers.
Is that the original colour of the...
That's the original colour of the cream
So
tops.
they haven't painted them gold?
No, they haven't. And then he's done the same plaster of Paris. It's like a twig,
Yeah.
and it runs across the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And that was made for me by Jimmy and Matty.
So what other memories do you have of events and fun times at Carisbrook in the late 1950s?
Well, I can remember the first time we had a New Year's Eve party at Carisbrook, because on the 31st of December, it's also Jimmy and Matty McDougall's birthday
Right.
on New Year's Eve.
So double celebration.
Double celebration, and not only New Year's Eve, Hogmanay.
Yep. Which
We-
is the traditional Scottish New Year's.
Yes.
Yep.
So the table would be set up in the hallway,
In the central hallway.
right down the hallway,
Yep.
completely set up with drinks and glasses and
Yeah. How many people were there?
I did dozens of people, probably 20, 30 friends, family, friends, a lot of chaps from television, a lot of young people from the ballet.
Yeah. So Uncle Wes and Uncle Jim had a particularly strong connection with the ballet scene in Sydney at the time.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
They held a season's ticket,
Yeah.
which was for 3 people, and I was the third.
I'm so jealous.
Yes.
I would love to have gone to the ballet with them.
I went with them most
What
times.
did you see?
I saw everything.
Yeah.
Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty,
Any highlights?
everything. And I did meet Sir Robert Helpman one night, introduced to me by Jimmy McDougall.
Right. So they had good connections with
They
the
had
ballet.
good connections with the ballet.
Didn't you see Margot Fontaine and Rudolph
I
Nureyev?
did. I saw Margot Fontaine, Rudolph, and Don Quixote.
So essentially you were living the life of Eliza Doolittle, weren't you?
Yes, you could say that.
You were what, 19, 20?
I'd probably have been, well, I was 19.
Born and raised in Campsie, made a very big connection with these fabulous McDougalls and Eatons.
And one of 8 children.
And you were one of 8 children as
Yes.
well, so you felt particularly spoiled.
Yes, I did feel a little bit like Eliza Doolittle.
Sounds like they enjoyed spoiling
Yes,
you
they
too.
did.
So your memories of New Year's Eve?
Yes, so we'd all sit down, we'd have food. We never had haggis. She never made haggis for us.
Mrs.
There was
Mack.
always a threat that haggis was going to be made, and I'd say, I'm not going, I don't want to eat haggis. But we sat there, we had drinks, and then at midnight, Mr. McDougall was alive then, their father.
Yeah.
He used to sit at the head of the table with his bottle of scotch,
Right.
loving it.
Yeah.
And round about midnight, we'd sing Happy Birthday
Yeah.
for Jimmy and Matty.
Mhm.
Then we'd all sing Old Lang Syne.
Absolutely.
And then into the big lounge room, which had a grand piano in there.
Yeah.
And Uncle Wes used to play the piano, and we'd sing for hours and hours and hours.
Now, when I was a kid, you used to freak me out telling me about a poltergeist in Carisbrook. And to be honest, even now, when I drive past Carisbrook, the first thing I think about is the story of the poltergeist. Tell me.
Well, they used to say that there's like a linen closet in the hallway, off the hallway. It's just a little, it's like a pantry kind of room.
So when we visited there recently, you showed me.
I did, I showed you where the door was.
Crockery and stuff in there currently.
And occasionally, Uncle Wes and Jimmy would say that things came flying out of that room.
So how?
Like, just came out. Like face flannels and towels and...
Just flew out?
Just flew out the
Was
door.
Was the door open or did the door...
If the door was open,
If the
yes.
door was open.
So my Uncle Wes decided that it was time to have a medium come down there. And the medium came and he said to them, it's a poltergeist.
All right.
Now, the poltergeist is supposed to be the spirit of a child.
Yeah.
And he claimed that there had been a child that was drowned in what was then called the well. You know, was this all hearsay? Were they meant to frighten me? I'm not sure.
Well, this is it. Were they pulling your leg?
Were they pulling my leg?
It seems like a huge length to go to just to have a bit of a joke on
Yes. Yes. So anybody that lives there, if you see anything strange, it might be the poltergeist.
So I think one of the most interesting things about the McDougall brothers' story is the way they passed away. I know Uncle Matty went first. So can you tell us a little bit about the circumstances around their deaths?
Yes. Well, Matty had gone to Scotland to dance in a competition, Highland dancing.
Yeah.
And he had cousins there, of course, and stayed with his cousins.
In Ayrshire?
In Ayrshire,
Yeah.
yeah. And then he, on his way back to Australia, he thought he might go and sail up the Nile. So he got to Heathrow Airport and he had a massive heart attack. And they couldn't revive him. Jimmy was notified and said to the cousins, please bury him in Ayrshire.
Yeah. That's sad. What a shock for Uncle Jim.
A very big shock.
Yeah.
So he was buried in Ayrshire.
Mhm.
Jimmy never went over.
For the funeral.
No, to the funeral. Jimmy stayed here.
Mhm.
And 2 years later, Jimmy said, I will go to Ayrshire
Mhm.
and visit my twin brother's grave.
Mhm.
He went. He saw all his cousins, had a good old time with them, came back to Heathrow Airport. He had a massive heart attack and died.
In the airport. Same as Uncle
In the
Matty.
airport, exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So Jimmy's cousins buried him alongside his twin brother in Ayrshire.
So they're both buried together over
They're
in
both
Ayrshire.
buried together.
It's a bit spooky, isn't it?